been exposed to different truths in our histories that we weren't taught in schools, covering slavery, Black codes, the Jim Crow laws, the 15th Amendment and voter suppression tied along with it, mass incarceration, economic injustice, and that's just like naming a couple of them. But in this moment right now, this is actually the first time that a lot of us, and I'll speak for myself, have been, forced as a Black American to be immersed into this constant reminder that my Black life doesn't matter that much to a lot of people in America. A lot of people come up with constant justifications of Black men being killed in 2020 because they weren't completely innocent, or they carry some kind of background that they feel deems it's all right that they died. Or they'll simply state, had they played by the rules, that wouldn't have happened. They would still be living, like all they needed to do was listen. But you hear this, and then you hear people demand to scream, all lives matter. You look at the NFL right now and you see audiences like booing NFL players, not for like kneeling for a flag, but just simply like standing together just to, just have a moment of unity. And it just becomes extremely frustrating, just making a lot of people question what it will actually take to make people see that Black people deserve to live. And Black people actually deserve to receive the same amount of justice as everyone else that America claims that we all, we're capable of receiving. But I think the biggest question that should be answered and should be asked to everybody, but what is actually Black justice? What do Black people consider justice for their community? Is that, just merely placing everybody in prison that harm us? And are we only asking that because they would do that to us? And so we have a panel today just together, just speak on the history of all of this, talk about the current case that, is now going to the grand jury to see if they'll get indicted, and just see the relevancy of different things that are going on, different movements we can actually stand behind for change outside of simply just posting images on social media, say her name, or arrest the killers of Breonna Taylor. Like, what can the Black community actually stand together and do past social media? So right now we're just gonna go ahead and introduce our panelists that are here today to help us, just start this discussion. Ellie?
Thanks, Dom. Hey, good evening, everyone. I am LaMeshia Whittington, and today the hat that I'm wearing is Deputy Director of Advanced Carolina, but above all, I'm a North Carolinian and a Black woman. So really good to be here. And Dom, did you want me to pass it to someone else for introduction, or how would you prefer?
We can just go to Preezy, that's fine.
Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I go by Preezy Brown. I'm a freelance journalist based out of Brooklyn, New York. I write about hip hop, lifestyle, different things, everything under the sun that's pertaining to Black people, that's pertaining to urban, anything Black. And what drew me to this conversation was I just want to see progress rather than lip service, because I come from the community, and I want to see the community progress rather than just be posting hashtags and stuff. Like, it's good to bring awareness, but I want to see actual change, tangible change. So that's what brought me to the chat.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today. Bree?
Hi, everybody. My name is Bree Newsome Bass. I am a grassroots community organizer and movement builder in North Carolina, and same as everybody, here to build organized power, because that's what we need to bring about change.
Hello, everyone. My name is Attorney Dawn Blagrove. I'm the Executive Director of Emancipate NC in North Carolina. My organization strives to end structural and institutional racism and stand with justice-involved people. And that is what we do in every way that we possibly can, and in every capacity that we can.
Awesome. And just thank you, everyone, again, for being here today. And we're just going to move forward with the conversation, because I will never claim to hold every fact about our history. I have constantly been reading and studying and immersing myself into, the truth about, the Black American struggle in America right now. And the one thing that I find constant is that history keeps repeating itself. The fight for justice didn't just begin. We've been fighting for justice, but America keeps coming up with different ways to suppress our voice, and everybody calms down after a little bit. So we have like back in 1955, a 14-year-old, a Black boy from Chicago allegedly whistled at a white woman behind the counter. And due to that, he was deemed to be violating the Jim Crow South laws. You have 2 grown men that then drag him from his uncle's house, beat the crap out of him, and then shoot him to ensure that he is dead. And there was never justice deemed. And his mother, sacrificed herself and, said, hey, we're going to have an open casket funeral so the world can see what they've done to my son, which I'm sure everyone knows the name of, Emmett Till. And even with exposing that tragedy, 65 years later, we are still fighting. And so that's just one of the things like you look back at and you're just trying to figure out, like, do these protests really work? Are these social medias has because they're new? Will this have impact? This is different. But then you have to look at more facts, because in 2020 alone, police have killed 164 Black people in the first 8 months of the year. You break it down to like make it more tangible. That's one person, one Black man and one Black woman on average a week that they're killing. And so because of this like seemingly unending injustice of this, it just brings about, different, topics of Breonna Taylor right now, because that's the one thing that we continue to say her name. We're not talking about her name enough. She's not receiving justice. And the main thing is just because they will not even charge or indict these. They have yet to charge and indict these officers. LA, just speak to me briefly, what the history of this and why it continues to happen, and what we're not, what could we be doing differently that hasn't been done in the past to even start to think about change?
Right. So again, thank you for having me this evening. And so something I'll do today that I will actually implement within my practices from here on out is today I'm centering the Black woman. And our liberation, and why that is a part of collective freedom for our people. Until the Black woman is fully liberated, we cannot talk about liberation for Black people. So let me back that up a little bit, talking about historical accord. So when we are talking about during the period of course, enslavement, we are talking about colonial laws that complemented stereotypes, the stereotypes that complemented those laws. Why do I back up? There were actual laws that deemed Black women as property, as we are all well aware, but it also said that Black women were incapable of being assaulted because they were either unattractive and didn't warrant it, or they were too attractive and wanted the assault. It was either or, and those stereotypical tropes of Jezebel or aggressive behavior allowed those laws to continue perpetuate actually into judges ruling and making decisions on behalf of white individuals who would, of course, enact these assaults, and it rendered Black women erased and silenced. This was established in the foundation of this nation. It is constitutional. When we talk about the Constitution, it is laid as the groundwork. So if we are not being accurate with where we came from, how can we seek the path forward for liberation? When we are talking about emancipation, we have this whitewashed historical accord that slavery was magically disappeared, the fragments of trauma was done, and it was erased within not only ourselves, but within white people as well, because Lincoln was benevolent, the Confederacy was dead, and so forth. But we didn't talk about the daughters of the Confederacy. We didn't talk about the suffrage rights that happened at the same exact time that the Jim Crow era was established, the exact same period of 1870s. We don't talk about the fact that it was only 7 years between emancipation and Jim Crow being established. So we were all free for a total of 7 years. And even between then, there were Black codes when overseers became police, when whips became bullets. Sounds like 2020. So if we are not talking about the fact that we know Sojourner Truth, Charlotte Van Dyne Fortin, Harriet Fortin Purvis, Ida B. Wells Barnett, Anna Cooper was fighting for the liberation of the suffrage movement while being unable to vote themselves because of course, laws and, poll literacy tests and the like, at the same time of still being dehumanized, assaulted, and abused, and not seen as humans. The movement was built in our blood, on our backs, and with fragments of our souls. And so to wrap this brief statement up here is when we're talking about justice, and I think about Breonna Taylor, it also makes me think about Henrietta Lacks in the 50s, right? When her cells were stolen from her body without her permission, and her cells is the lifeline to many, many cures across the world, yet she died of medical maltreatment, state-sanctioned violence. She died of not having the addressment to her own cancer, but her cells was the liberation to other folks' cure. Breonna Taylor was an EMT. She saved lives medically, but she was stolen from us in her home. In the comforts of laying with her Black partner, her Black boyfriend, she was stolen like slavery, reminiscence of being ripped apart. She was ripped apart from him as he struggled to call the ambulance to get her help in resuscitation, because again, medical maltreatment is still going to render its ugly head at the same time that she was assaulted and riddled with bullets. So she dealt with state-sanctioned violence and medical maltreatment at the same time, and her Black boyfriend, her man, could not do anything to save her from that incident, and he still was arrested and charged. It is history repeating itself, and until the Black woman is liberated and we see true liberation within her, the movement will continue to stalwart, because as we see with Breonna Taylor, justice has not been brought swiftly.
And I think it's very imperative that you even highlight that. They were doing interviews with lawyers saying that if, it was even a point of charging the police officers. And one Black attorney that they interviewed, she stated, the seemingly unending list of unarmed Black men who have been and continue to be gunned down by white police officers does not and cannot justify the return indictment based on revenge rather than facts of the case and law. So they're saying that there's not even enough to base any charges to provide justice to the Black community. And so just looking at justice, like textbook, look up Webster, justice is going to tell you that, it's a just behavior treatment, a quality of being fair and reasonable, and then actually the administration of law and authority in maintaining all of this. And we all know that they don't maintain justice with any of us, barely. And I speak to that just personally, knowing sitting in prison for a crime I didn't commit. But, Bree, I just want to speak to you, I just provided the textbook definition of justice, but how do you feel the Black community collectively defines justice? And are we just simply trying to mimic what would be done against us?
Yeah, so I think we have to distinguish between justice as what you define it, right? Mm-hmm. And the quote unquote justice system, which is this, organized systems of courts and laws, which has always been, labeled just, has never been just for us, right? So one of the reasons why I personally identify as a revolutionary is because I don't believe that we as Black people can get justice within white supremacist systems, right? So we're talking about the very same courts that for centuries, more often than not, in their existence, have existed to justify our enslavement, to justify racism against us, to justify the violence. And that's the same thing that's occurring in the Breonna Taylor case. Part of the reason why it's not clear, it's probably unlikely, quite frankly, that we are going to see charges brought in this case is because what the police did was arguably legal, right? So the issue that we are going up against is exactly what LaMeshia was speaking to, which is that the violence against us has been legalized. It has been codified in law. And so trying to seek quote unquote justice, in the definition that you gave, through the very systems that are designed and set up and operate to deny our humanity, it doesn't pan out. And I mean, that's why I'm among the people that think that we need to abolish the police. We need to abolish the prison system because it will never bring us that kind of justice. We always talk about justice for the victims. You can't really bring justice for the dead. There will not be justice for Breonna Taylor. Justice for Breonna Taylor would be her still being alive today. So justice is something that we pursue for everyone who is living, beyond this moment, everyone who comes beyond this moment. And quite frankly, arresting and incarcerating a couple of officers does not equate to that kind of systemic justice, because all that happens is those officers get replaced with other officers, more people continue to die. And this is part of why I'm kind of, I think obviously everyone is entitled, every family, every victim is entitled to pursue what they feel makes them whole. And I don't think that any of us can define that for somebody else. But just talking collectively as Black people, and what does it mean for us to have like a collective justice? That process, like focusing in on one case as though that really, solves the issue of systemic racism, it simply doesn't. And that's why we really have to talk about dismantling white supremacist systems. That's what we're going up against. Each of these cases, fits into an overall white supremacist system. And part of what I repeatedly argue is that the whole legal process, by the time we go through it from beginning to end, whether an officer ends up in jail or doesn't, at the end of the day, it only serves to justify the ongoing system, right? Because what we are ultimately arguing is that there is any circumstance in which it is okay for police to knock down the doors and come in and shoot us. I mean, the fact that we are having to go through a process, the fact that we have to protest, to get people arrested, to go to the grand jury, is because on its premise, we are saying that there are some circumstances under which that is okay. And see, until we reach a point where that is not okay, where that happens under no circumstances, we're not achieving justice. And I don't think we get there unless we really start dismantling these very systems that were established to enslave us. When LaMeshia was talking about, the court system, slavery was legal. Segregation was legal. I mean, the process that occurred with the court system in the lynching of Emmett Till, the acquittal of those killers, what that basically means is that it was legalized what they did. What we witnessed in the acquittal of George Zimmerman was to say that legally George Zimmerman had a right to stop Trayvon Martin, to attack him, to kill him, and Trayvon Martin, as a young Black teenager, had no right to defend himself. That's what the legal outcome is. And see, until you change the power structure, until you remove the people who are in power so that racists are no longer the ones who are making these laws and making the decisions, we don't get there. And I think that's the difference in my mind between reform and revolution, like really understanding the difference between those concepts, like really understanding that you cannot reform a system that is designed to do what it does. Like the system is not broken. The system is operating as designed. And it's like you're trying to reform, a car into an airplane. You cannot do that. You have to build something new.
Okay, well, I completely agree that the system needs to be restructured. I don't think it's not that I don't think it was not created and founded in the interest of any Black American in here right now. However, I am in the midst of, trying to dismantle it. Aren't there certain things that we should still attack? And I just use it, qualified immunity right now. So I feel you can't dismantle the system, but qualified immunity is what is actually being placed up to protect these officers at this point. And so what would be your suggestion for anyone who feels that they need to become active and become aggressive with that? And I would want everybody to understand it's hard to go against certain things when you live in different states. I do get that as well. But just in general, if it happens in their area and there's what else can they do to get involved in these contracts that are already created to protect these police officers?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that is a very good thing to pursue. We need to end qualified immunity, but we have to recognize why that can't be the be all and end all, because part of what the issue is that they're running into with Breonna Taylor's case is that it was really arguably legal what the police did. And see, qualified immunity requires you to prove that what the police officers did was, unlawful in some type of way. That's the barrier that they're running up against. I also think the push to defund police is a very concrete and reasonable way to begin dismantling these systems. We're talking about, let's stop trying to use police and prisons as the catch-all, be-all, everything for everything that we do, and let's shift resources to other ways to address harms in our community, to improve public health. So when we talk about transforming the system, we recognize that the system's not broken, the system itself needs to change. There are still very concrete steps that we can take. And I think that attacking qualified immunity, doing away with that is one of the top ones that needs to happen, absolutely.
Yeah, and did anybody else have any comments regarding that?
Add to the discussion about qualified immunity is this. The other thing about dismantling qualified immunity is that it's not just about holding law enforcement officers accountable. It is about understanding what is at the heart of the systems that govern us now. What holds those systems together? What holds those systems together is white supremacy, white privilege, and capitalism, okay? Ending qualified immunity is one way to use capitalism against the system. Because right now, when an officer behaves poorly, commits crimes, is violent, harms a citizen, that officer does not feel the economic impact of his actions. And because he does not, because through qualified immunity, what happens is that officer is insulated from being held civilly responsible. That means monetarily responsible for his wrong acts. Even worse, what happens under qualified immunity is that citizens, we do then bear the burden economically of that person's bad act. So what we're looking at again is, at its base, a system that, number one, protects itself. Number two, is based in capitalism, and in the capitalism and in protecting the economic wealth of those people who have privilege, of those officers who have the privilege that the rest of us don't have, right? So by dismantling qualified immunity, what we do is attack the system at one of its biggest Achilles heel, which is economic, which is capitalism. If law enforcement officers, I promise you, if law enforcement officers risk losing their homes and their livelihoods, could not send their children to college, every time that they've committed not just murder, but any act of violence, whether it is physical, whether it is emotional, whether it is psychological, against Black people in these streets, while they're being paid with taxpayer dollars, they would all think about changing. Because here's the problem. You can't fix racism. You can't fix systems based on supremacy. You can't fix that, right? We can't change, you can't policy away implicit bias. You can't policy away racist officers. That is not a thing that works. What we can do is figure out what motivates those people and use that motivation to attack and change their behavior. That's the importance of ending qualified immunity. So while it is something of a reform, I think it speaks directly to and goes directly to the dismantling, the abolition of these systems that Bree was talking about. We just need to be able to fully understand and contextualize how each one of these reforms is actually a step towards abolition.
I completely agree. And I think it's very important that people even know, like, just a small piece of the history of qualified immunity, just for it just being a statute originally created to protect the South and the Ku Klux Klan's, violence against Black Americans after the war, after the Civil War. So it's just like that was always instituted to create a defense from them harming us. And so all that has done, like I said, history repeating itself, is evolved to continue to provide them with that protection. And so I know I asked, what we look at is justice. And Preezy, I want to bring you in, because typically if somebody kills one person out of the Black community, everybody is screaming for them to go to prison. They need to go to prison too. If we killed somebody, they'd send us to prison. How do you feel that's an appropriate response to any harm that's done against, or not feel? Your opinion on that?
I think that's a misguided, reaction to somebody killing somebody in our, in our neighborhood or in our communities. I just think that's a misguided thing, because other people, we it's good to bring awareness. People who kill us, or to hold people accountable, but I think that sometimes we mess the buck and act more like a white person or a police officer, of somebody with a law, like a member of law enforcement, that's one of them killing us is worse than one of us killing our own. It's good to get justice, it's good to get but it's like the people want some recompense from the system for years of what Bree was saying, what all the other panelists were saying, for all of that pain. It just seems that a lot of people want some recompense from the system, and they want that payback. So when we see something getting highlighted, like a Bree Newsome, like a Breonna Taylor, or we see an Ahmaud Arbery, or we see like all of these killings, we want that as a symbolism to get some payback. But I think also on top of that, it's good to see that we get some justice and some recompense from the system. And at the same time, I think it starts with the community too. It starts with us really holding each other accountable too, because it really starts in the mind and in the heart with people, you know. So we're not going to dismantle racism like the last panelist just said. Like, that's never going to happen. So all that we can do is come together and really hold each other accountable, as well as holding these government, you know, like officials accountable, as you know, like as well as holding these police all accountable, and even the correctional officers as well. It's just holding everybody accountable. But I think that everybody wants some payback, and they just sometimes the focus is misguided, basically.
Okay, and so you're saying like it's payback, but do you feel that prison actually does anything? Like, so you send somebody to prison and they sit there, what happens? I know I wrote an article about after Ahmaud Arbery's shooting. I did not know what was going to happen after Ahmaud Arbery, but I said, okay, so they're, you know, they've been charged, they're sitting in jail. What happens now? How does that protect us? How does his killer sitting behind the walls do anything? You know, if every person that killed a Black person sat in prison for the rest of their life, are Black people not going to die anymore?
So if I could jump in. Oh,
yeah, like that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely not. I think that prison, like I said before, it starts with in the heart. Like, I think that sometimes, like, I don't know what was in the officer's heart on that night when he pumped, you know, all of them shots, when he did total call. I don't know if he's erased what was in his heart, but I like accountable basically, and everybody has to pay their price. Like, if you violate a law, like they were saying, like the no-knock since been like abolished, you know, or taken out in Louisville, which is a good, you know, thing. But at the time, it's like some of these officers aren't trained right, so they may be nervous under the gun. Not to say it's not right. So them sitting in prison isn't going to change them in their heart. Like, if they was racist, but I don't think that prison is really going to knock the racists out of. If somebody made an honest mistake, I think that people can be rehabilitated by the system, you know, but it starts with yourself. So I don't think that really Breonna Taylor's killers, I don't think if they get charged, I don't think that that's going to really change anything. I don't think that that's going to stop anything. Like Bree was saying earlier, I think it starts with the system. I think it starts with these laws, with us really cracking down and really focusing on less hashtag activism, but more getting into these, you know, contacting like and such like that.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Don.
I was just going to say, I also think that we have to be, even having the conversation of whether or not sending these folks to prison, sending these officers who are murderers, sending these murdering cops to prison, or sending these murdering vigilantes who are, you know, battering Black and brown bodies, sending them to prison is justice. In order for us to really and truly dismantle these systems and really and truly step towards revolution, we have got to let go of the chains of the paradigms that they've created for us. We only think that prison is the right way, or the way that you get justice, or the way that you extract some type of revenge for a wrongful act, because that is what we have been told, that is what we have been conditioned to believe is true. But I'm sure LA can speak more on this because she is our history buff here. But historically, as people, that is not the way we dealt with one another. That is not the way we found justice. We know, even if we don't know consciously in our DNA, if we are able to shake off the paradigm of these racist systems that we live in, these oppressive systems that we are told are our only options, and really think freely about what other ways and other things we can use to make our whole communities feel whole, to make us feel real and safe, they don't involve law enforcement, and they certainly don't involve prisons. We have always, listen, when we, even in this country, prior to segregation, when it was just us, in our own communities, left to our own devices, we took care of each other. If somebody cut up, we took care of that person the way they needed to be taken care of, not in a way that cast them or banished them from the village, but in a way that corrected them, in a way that supported them. Because here's what we know: hurt people, right? We treat the trauma. You treat the trauma, you get to the underlying issues and the reasons why people are acting out in deviant ways, or ways that aren't even really deviant, have just been deemed deviant by society, and we fix the person. Prisons and the police system, the entire carceral system is reactive. If we want justice, it has to be based in a system that is proactive, that is forward thinking, that is about making things and people and communities whole. And when we do that, everything else will fall into place. So even the question of why is it that Black folks think that they want police, think that they need police? Because we don't know what else to do, right? Because we have been told for centuries that in order to be safe, we need white structures to keep us safe. Even in the face of data, facts, all kinds of research, and our lived experiences that tell us that this system doesn't work, we still cling to it because it is a safety mechanism. I often, when I'm talking about abolishing the police, abolishing the carceral system, one of the things that I hearken back to when you get this massive pushback from people who tell you, oh, we can't do that, I remind people, not only as a people, can we do it? We have done it. I'm going to remind you all that slavery was also abolished. It wasn't easy. Lots of sacrifices had to be made. But enough people have to believe that there is something better for us on the other side, and that we walk into that dark pathway, not knowing where we're going, but knowing that wherever we're going is going to lead us to a place that is freer than the place we are in. That is the mentality that we need to accept about this carceral system, about criminal justice, about the police, about all of it, about racism. We have to be willing to say this criminal justice system is not just, and is a system that is not based on anything logical.
Right.
We don't know what it's going to look like on the other side, but what I know for sure is it's got to be better than this, certainly for me and my people.
And Dom, if I could just add one piece of just all of that truth, all of that truth. The question is, well, right, this is the piece that I'm going to answer to, because Don really elevated all of where we came from, who we are, and how when we are left in peace, alone to live our lives thriving, we know how to handle our business and love freely. So what I'm going to answer to is, can the perpetrators of violence be reformed in prison? Let's talk about this very briefly. I mentioned the Black codes. I've mentioned this before. The Black codes were a series of laws. They were just nicknamed the Black codes. Let's just say that. There were laws that was literally the anger of former plantation owners, who also doubled as elected representatives, by the way, because they used our bodies for census data and electoral power. So let's say there's no distinction when we romanticize our presidents and our elected officials. They were the plantation owners. That's how they became elected. But that's a whole nother, that's a whole nother sermon for another time. So where I'm going is, when they created these laws, it was because they were angry and they wanted to adapt to a modern version of making sure that they still profited, as Don and Bree said, capitalism off of us. They didn't want to lose us. They didn't want to lose that money. These laws were established. It was illegal for a Black person to be without a job. Okay, you were just released from a plantation from years of enslavement, and now you're being arrested because of vagrancy. Oh, you're unemployed. You're being arrested because you're congregating, hanging out with other Black people in groups of 2 or 3. Y'all can't hang together. Oh, wow. And what that did was gave police a job and a charge to arrest us, to then give us right back to the very plantations that were now literally the former plantation land, that now just changed its commercial branding. And it was no longer a plantation, it was privatized prison. Oh, wow. It just changed labels. And then the police, who were the overseers, now have a job, a badge, and they could even deputize their friends if they felt like it. You didn't have to go through training. and they literally arrested our people and put them back in. The prison was created for us to keep us an economic vehicle so that America wouldn't lose its economic prosperity and wealth. That is what it was created to do. So the prison and the police structure was created to literally make up laws. We can't get away from the 13th Amendment of the Constitution. We are still slaves if we are found guilty of a crime. That was the loophole that fit the whole structure of punitive, right? That arrestment, the being arrested, the police. So will a white person who is committing state-sanctioned violence be rebuked and reformed by the very system that was created to give it the power to arrest us? No, the system was created for us to be arrested. It wasn't created for white people to be arrested. So how can a system that was built on keeping us an economic vehicle be about reforming any white person when it was built for them to uphold it? It's an oxymoron. So no.
Can I say real quick to everything that LaMeshia was just lifting up? Like, I really think, in my view, I really feel like we have to make some separation between state violence, state-sanctioned white supremacist violence, and community and harms committed within our community. Like, I think those are separate but related but separate issues, right? And because I think when we try to compare violence committed by police, murders committed by police to, a neighbor committing a harm against it, those are not the same thing, right? The violence that police are committing, it serves the overall purpose of racial control, which is why they are allowed to commit it. And I think that's why we have to be careful, or we have to actually resist this narrative that the power structure tries to put forward of the bad apples, or how do we deal with the cops that act violent? Like, the whole institution is violent. It's not, and it's not just the people who are murdered by police. That's just one segment of the violence. The violence is pervasive. The violence is constant. It exists in many different ways. If we are forced into situations where we're not earning enough to pay our rent, and then we can't make the rent, they send the police, they send these tools of violence to evict us from our homes. One of the other things that has come up in discussion of the Breonna Taylor case is how it is a product of gentrification. How this whole, this violence that we are experiencing, this ramping up in encounters with police also has to do with us being driven off of our land, another cycle. I mean, this is something that happens every generation. So I really feel like we have to be resistant against this narrative that tries to isolate these cases of police violence as though, how do we deal with the officer that was problematic? It's not just the officer. If it was just the officer, then there would already be a system in place to deal with that officer. That officer is backed up by an entire system. That officer is allowed to be violent because that officer having the power to be violent in that way is what maintains the ruling white elite. That's why as soon as we start talking about stuff like defunding the police or reforming the police, there's such a pushback against it because it is so essential to how the whole racial order is maintained, exactly the history that LaMeshia is lifting up. I mean, we just see it in a modern context.
I think all of that is go ahead.
I will also say earlier to the conversation that we know that the system's not for us, that we know that the system's not, geared towards us, that why do we continue to try to exist inside of the system if we know that it's not for us? Why don't we centralize more as a people too? While we're battling these things, why don't we internalize that, that we don't know? Because we say that the system's not for us, but sometimes I don't think we act as if that's the case all of the time. So that would be my question. Why don't we centralize more as a people, outside of these cases, outside of these, atrocities?
Well, I would love feedback on all the panelists, and I think that's a really important question. It's a question I ask all the time. Being a person wrongfully incarcerated, I tell people all the time, I know it was me, but it's your problem too. I provide you with the historical facts of how, LA was mentioning, Black codes, and then, transforming to Jim Crow laws, how the system was based off the fact of getting us back into enslavement and keeping us underground and, with control. So if that means it was created for Black people so they could be, that's your problem. I have no background of criminal history. I don't suit a stereotypical mold, nor did I even carry evidence where they could actually charge me walking into the courthouse. I still spent 5 years in prison. And so I feel that that is a key symbol to any person, that could be you as well. And this, if you are Black, that is your problem. But I don't know the best method of actually going forward and showing or telling every Black person of coming together, being like, hey, let's work together, because tomorrow it could be you. Hey, tomorrow it might be you as well. What would you guys say on that part?
I mean, I would just say real quickly, like, so as a community organizer, right, and we're trying to organize the community, one of the main forces that we're coming up against is just like the systemic disorganization of our communities. And like all of these issues that we touch on are tied together. Like, it's not a coincidence that as soon as we like build community, they destroy our communities. Like we are literally at a point just now of trying to recover and rebuild from the deliberate destruction of our communities that happened a generation ago. Like, I've been organizing in Charlotte, and you know, we're dealing with gentrification now, but we're also addressing what happened in the late 60s, like where they literally came through. If we had built economic power, if we had schools, if we were like building organization, anytime that we reach a point, which we are at again now, where we're coming together collectively, we're like building a collective conscience, and we're saying like we need to move as a community, the system maneuvers to dismantle that, to create that sense of like individualism, right? Like what you're talking about, where it's like, oh no, they want us to buy into this idea of American individualism. What do you mean? Like, we don't have to unite as Black people. Like, I'm just an American. I just compete. I try to climb the ladder. I try to make it, work hard, stay out of trouble, like all of those myths, right? Because they want to disrupt our ability to build community and to do the exact things like Preezy was talking about, like having our own alternative solutions for addressing conflict in our community. If people are constantly being taken out of our community into the prison system, are constantly displaced, geographically, or we're so caught in a cycle of trying to survive on a day-by-day basis that we can't really organize and build, like all of that works together to keep us in a controlled state. And all of that is absolutely deliberate. And so I think for us to like be aware of that and to like consciously, organize ourselves against, like recognizing that is what is happening. Like that is what they are doing. It's not happenstance. Like, people sit in rooms and they roll out the map of the community and they figure out how they're going to run a highway through our community. They figure out how they're going to displace things because when they see that we're building political power. I mean, right now we are dealing in the aftermath of Obama getting elected, right? And what that represented in terms of the potential of our political power, in terms of the shifting demographics of the country. And so what we are seeing right now is like this white supremacist maneuvering to dismantle any kind of organization in the Black community, any kind of like Black brown building. So I think it was Preezy who mentioned it before, like the mentality is a very essential part of it, because in order to like organize and build, we have to be aware of what we're building, why we're building, what we're building against.
Well, we had someone in here, they said we need to quit voting for black white people and true Black leaders instead, who embrace the Blackness. Our Black leaders oppress us too, and we oppress each other.
That's real. That's so real.
Yeah,
but
that's
I think
a fact.
the reason I want to just say again that, and stand just for a teeny tiny second, this is why Bree is my imaginary best friend, because she's amazing.
No, you're my real best friend.
But I think that really, when we talk about building community, we say it all the time. We give this lip service. We are a village. It takes a village. It takes a village. But we have got to own that. We have got to own that all of us live or die as Black folks. We live or die together. Our fates are intertwined. I don't care what your economic status is. I don't care where you went to college. I don't care what you do for a living. I don't care. That starts inside of our homes. My children come from a upper middle class background. We stay at a lot of really fancy hotels, travel all over the country. But one thing that my babies have learned and always know is that when you see another Black person, that person is me. I am looking at me. I don't care who you are. So if it's a Black lady cleaning our hotel room, my girls from babies will write thank you note every single day. Thank you. Thank you for coming in and cleaning my room. Thank you for taking care of me, because I know that someone else may not. Someone that doesn't look like me may not. And I also know that there's other people that look like me that aren't going to thank you. But I'm not going to be that person, because I know that we live and die together, right? that is the first thing that we have to do. We have to bring that back into our homes. We have to disengage from this idea that there are some of us that are more worthy than others, that there are some Black folks that are not, that because they talk back to the police, well, then maybe they deserve to be shot and killed in the street in front of their children. Like, we got to shake off our own chains of oppression. And that is so real. And that is something that even as organizers, it is probably the hardest thing about organizing is, helping our own folks shake off the chains of oppression. And it's not their fault. I'm not blaming us because I'm not into that. We have been traumatized. We have been beaten. These are accepting these chains and figuring out how to survive within them is a defense mechanism that we needed to survive. But we are at a place now where I truly believe we can shake it off. We can shake off those chains of oppression. If we are conscious of them, if we make ourselves aware of them, we can shake off those chains of oppression, come together and really create powerful changes in the way our country works and in the way we show up in America and the way America shows up to us. This is the moment for that. But again, we can't just talk about what they need to do. We got to also talk about the work we need to do, because we got work to do.
Well, we need to address what we have to do. However, we also need to address the facts and the realities of what is about to occur. So just quickly going back to Breonna Taylor. So, this week, the Attorney General, everybody's favorite Black man, Daniel Cameron, he's actually going to present the case before the grand jury in Louisville. And they're going to have the option of indicting Jonathan Madeleine. How do you say Hankinson is his name? I'm not sure. I really don't care how I pronounce it, actually.
It doesn't matter.
Miles Cosgrove. So, these are the officers that actually fired a weapon, and they can get indicted on any range of degrees of murder and homicide. So it ranges. Like, everybody thinks they'll get indicted. They think that they'll be charged with murder. That's not necessarily the case. Just to give people a background, the grand jury is actually composed of 12 people. They actually need 9 people to say, hey, they're going to be indicted. So 9 of those people have to come together and say, this is what's going to happen. If they don't have it, then it won't happen. But the grand jury also holds the power to exonerate these men from all of these charges. That's a lot of power for 12 people right now. Don, like I said, many people are expecting a murder charge. And I just want to talk about how it's probably not going to happen, because with murder, you have to prove someone had the intent of killing a person. And that's going to be mission impossible in this case. And then they also have the power to do a wanton endangerment. I just want to speak about that and what exactly that is as well.
Okay. Before we get into the specific charges, I really want to talk about this grand jury indictment process, okay? Because there is a saying in the legal community that a prosecutor can get a ham sandwich indicted, okay? Typically, indictments and grand juries are something that a district attorney might take 30 cases in front of a grand jury and spend 3 hours or less and get indictments on every single one of those cases. Literally, grand jury indictments, it usually takes less than 15 minutes to get an indictment returned for a district attorney on a case that they want to pursue. So let me just be 100% clear and help everybody understand that this horse and pony show that we go through for police officers, that it is a horse and pony show. If these district attorneys wanted to indict these people, this does not take, I read the other day that this was going to take the DA, your attorney general said 2 days to present this to a grand jury. That's insane. Let me let you understand what a grand jury process is. The defendant isn't even supposed to be there. In most cases, the defendant isn't there. His or her attorney isn't in the room. Just the district attorney, just the jury, and all they have to do is present the slimmest amount of information to say that they believe that this person should be indicted. And in 99.9% of the cases, these folks will get indicted. DAs will get the indictment that they want. So the first thing that I want people who are listening to understand is this. If the district attorney wants to indict these officers, they would be indicted, okay? This whole idea, it is up to the grand jury to determine whether or not that is out of the hands of district attorneys. It's foolishness. And it's a horse and pony show, and it's a manipulation of the system in order to give cover to these district attorneys who don't want to do their jobs, number one. Number two, the charges that are brought, again, the district attorney is the most important person in the criminal justice system, bar none, okay? They have the power to charge whatever they want to charge and indict whomever they want to indict, okay? While a jury may not return a verdict for murder in these cases, to say that a district attorney cannot get a murder indictment is preposterous. The district attorney can get whatever indictment they want to get. The reality is, if they present the evidence to the grand jury in a way that makes it clear that that is not what they want, then the grand jury is going to return what the district attorney wants. What we are seeing, I think what we are seeing forecast by this particular attorney general is that he has no intention of going in there and telling this jury, I want to take these cops to trial. He's not going to do that. He's forecasted so clearly, like he could have put up a billboard. That's not what he's going to do. He intends to use this grand jury as cover for why he is not prosecuting these cops. Okay? Now, what charges are brought? And I think, again, this goes back to, what does justice really look like? We can bring murder charges. We could ask for murder charges. Could you get a murder conviction? I don't know. But I think that if I tell you what I do know for sure, that if the situation was flipped and the boyfriend was on the outside of the house with his friends and the police officers were on the inside, and there were gunshots exchanged, there would be no question that this was murder. So what makes this not murder? It goes back to those systems that we need to dismantle and destroy, right? It goes back to the legality of state-sanctioned violence. And also understand that those constructs, that state-sanctioned violence and the legality of it, are all artificial constructs. They are man-made. So just like man made them, man can dismantle them. But there has to be a will for that to happen. And right now we don't have that. So no matter what these men get charged with, no matter what they get indicted for, it will make us feel good. It will be performative. But ultimately, what we know and what we've seen time and time again is that the system protects itself. The district attorney, or in this case, the attorney general, is a state actor. The police, the carceral system, they are all fingers on the same hand. It is not designed for them to hold one another accountable. Nor is it a function of the system for them to actually hold one another accountable. So for us, what does this process look like? Yes. What will we probably come out with? Maybe we come out with reckless endangerment, which essentially just means, for anybody who wants to know, it just means you did something where you didn't intend to kill another person, but you did it in a way that was so reckless, that was so stupid, that someone died because of it, and we want to hold you accountable. Not because you intended to do it, but because you did what you did in a really stupid, piss poor way, right? That's essentially what reckless endangerment means. But again, we shouldn't need the law to do that for us. What I feel like would be justice is this. People are police officers. Anyone, if I'm an attorney, if I do my job poorly, I'm going to lose my license to practice. If police officers cannot function in a way that is professional, I don't care whether or not you go to prison is completely different. Is completely of no consequence to me. What I want to make sure though is that you and anybody who acts like you no longer has the privilege of carrying a gun and be given the safety and the protection of our systems, right? Because that's what justice would feel like to me. Because what we have, right, even with these police officers who are fired, so they've been fired, big whoop. Because here's why that's a big, and I say big whoop, I'm sorry, but I say that because if they aren't losing their professional license to practice, to be a law enforcement officer, if they aren't losing their certifications, if there is not some national bar, some national database that says which people can never be law enforcement again in any capacity, in any jurisdiction, it doesn't really matter. We have this thing called wandering cops. These bad cops go from one jurisdiction to the other. They get jobs, they get rehired all over the place, and they just keep perpetuating and keep honing their skills as killer cops. So ultimately, the way the grand jury process works is nothing like what we're going to see or what we ever see as it relates to law enforcement. That's the first thing I want you to take away. Most people can get indicted on almost nothing in less than 10 minutes. Indictments are returned for even the most serious of crimes. This horse and pony show, 2 days, putting on evidence, it's all in the hands of the grand jury is foolishness. Don't believe it, don't buy into it, and push back against that narrative. Who almost cussed. The second thing is this attorney general could get any charges he or she wants. If a murder charge is not returned, it is because they did not present the evidence in a way where they asked that grand jury to give them a murder charge. I promise you. Grand juries are closed, so we'll never really know what happens inside of them. We'll never really know what they say or how they present that evidence. We'll only have to take their words for it, but I am telling you, as a state actor, I am telling you, if you don't get those murder charges, if we don't get any charges, it is not because the grand jury didn't do its job, it's because the attorney general didn't do his job, okay? That's number two. And lastly, no matter what charges they bring against these folks, whether they are murder charges, whether they are manslaughter, which is essentially what reckless endangerment is, it's not going to fix our problem. It won't stop the next Breonna Taylor. It won't stop the next George Floyd, and it won't stop the next killer cop. So if what we want is progress, if what we want is justice, we should stop looking to the courtrooms to give us that, because they're not going to, and start electing people locally and changing the actors, changing the decision makers, dismantling systems. That's how we get to justice. All right, I'm done.
Yes, on this, LA.
Oh, yeah. So again, thank you for having me this evening. I have to shift to another call actually about Black land loss and theft, which has led to our, untimely death and violence. And something that Bree said resonated with me, as well as something that Preezy said. And this is what I'll say before I'll shift, is everyone has a role to play in the liberation of our people. Everyone in the Black community, when we're talking about community organizing, has a role to play. Your role may not be a community organizer. Your role may not be a doctor, physician, blacksmith. I'm gonna go old school. You hold a community expertise that is unique to your lived, shared experiences. And here's the thing why this is important. We have been attacked from many angles. It is not one pathway to our oppression. It is multiple, which is why this is an entangled web that has been woven in order for us to feel confused, be confused, gaslit, and abused. We are in an abusive relationship with America, and we can't escape the house. That is where we are. And so as our people are struggling to survive, live, eat, we also know that there is oppression coming from gentrification, which is what Bree said that resonated with me. When we talk about the fact that gentrification played a role, land loss plays a role in Breonna's murder, think about that for a minute. Land loss and the theft of Black land played a role in the death of this Black woman, in addition to antiquated laws that makes it legal for them to knock without a warrant, right? These legal laws. And so because there's so many lanes of our oppression, our multiple gifts, our multiple lived shared experiences will be needed in order to flood the system and abolish these prisons and these chains that we call America. And I just say that, and it grounds me because I realize that not one person has a path to our liberation, because we fully don't grasp just how oppressed we are. And how can we know liberation if we've never tasted it? And so I just am, appreciative to you, Preezy, Bree, and Dawn. Always, appreciate y'all and being with y'all up here. And Dawn, thank you again for the invite, and just really appreciate y'all. See y'all in the movement.
Thank you, LA. And so, moving forward on this, because, we're sitting up here and we get the information about what may happen with Breonna Taylor and these indictments. We already know that there's going to be a large backlash with the Black community if they're not indicted with the murder charge, or they don't feel that they're going to be convicted and sent to prison. What do you feel what are your words to those people to act on their anger? Do you suggest, hey, keep a new hashtag going? This is what I do now. This is get involved with your community. Do you start or just become silent? Because like I said earlier, what we always notice is with every movement, people become silent with the smallest thing of performative action. So with Ahmaud Arbery, we became silent when they got charged with, George Floyd became silent because they received charges. So the second that anybody gets charges after any of these inconveniences, is like, oh yeah, we made it. We didn't make it. So what should the Black community be focusing on with the anger that may come in the upcoming days? Because I believe it's sometime this week, all the information is undisclosed.
Well, I think that people should just brace themselves and should not put all of this stuff. We should wait and hope for justice, but I wouldn't we had a saying when I was locked up, just don't bump your head when you go to court and when you go in front of them courts, but the irony of that, when you would go in front of a court, people that's locked up is a saying, don't bump your head. So you can't expect to get what you really think that you want to get, because it could turn out bad. So I would just tell the Black community to hope for the best. But if these cops don't get charged, I can't tell anybody how to react, but I would say just don't bank on justice being served, because we've seen time and time again that justice hasn't been served. From Rodney King to Trayvon Martin to different cases, justice hasn't been served. So I wouldn't hold my breath. But on top of that, if it doesn't get served, then that should give us more fervor, more hunger to really organize and really get to the gist of what's going on, to really get to the gist of dismantling these systems, to really get to the bottom of really valuing Black life, not just when a cop takes it or when a white person takes it or somebody else that's not a color, but when it's our own too. And then just mobilize basically as a community and really come together, because we know the system's not for us. And with this grand jury and indictment, if it doesn't come through the way that we want, that'll be another example that the system's not for us. So we can't continue to be looking for, them to be gracious to us. We just have to fight methodically and get these policies in place. Really, like I said, go to the local communities. Because in Louisville, I was reading, they have the history of racism and discrimination, against people of color, just like everywhere else. But I think if we systematically, as communities all over, I don't know where everybody's based at on this panel, but in New York, LA, St. Louis, any city, we really mobilize and get these policies changed and really start cracking down, then that can enact change, as well. But just to cut it short, I don't think that people should, bump their head, basically, for a lack of better words.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're past the Rubicon, quite frankly. Like I don't know if there has ever been as sustained consecutive days of protests as this country has seen since the killing of George Floyd. Like I don't know that for a fact. That'd be something to check out, but I don't think that there has. Like unless I'm mistaken, I don't think that that has happened before. So I really think that, you know, there are the issues of the individual cases and what is done in those individual cases. But I think we're also at a point where people are just recognizing like the system is, I mean, you know, we repeatedly say the system's not broken, right? But people know that it's failing them, right? Like in terms of it's not meeting their needs, whether it is the response to COVID-19, the climate crisis, the policing, because see, again, police are the force that the government uses when all these other things fail. So people are in desperate, you know, they're in desperate straits for all these other reasons. And then they send the police out in order to maintain social control, right? So these clashes between people and police are gonna keep happening. Even if the cops in the Breonna Taylor case are charged with first-degree murder and locked away for life, there's still gonna be more clashes in the street because these things are still gonna be happening because nothing has been done to resolve it. So I just kind of like echo and support everything that everyone has said. I think that a lot of times for people, these things can feel so overwhelming, like when we're talking about like just the enormity of it. But I really think like what LaMeshia said in particular is spot on. Like there are multiple things, there is no end to the list of things that needs to be done. Whether, you know, wherever you find yourself right now, you are an expert in something, there is a role that you can play. And I think recognizing like the multi, you know, faceted nature of what we are going up against is key, you know, in that. And so, you know, again, it's like we seek justice in these individual cases, but then like Preezy was saying, like day in and day out, you know, we're organizing in the community to shift policy. We're organizing in the community to, because there's some people that need to come up off of power, point blank, period. Like, and I think that's important for us to understand, like, there is a ruling, I refer to it as the ruling white elite. These are the people who hold most of the money and most of the power. They are the ones who are the inheritors of the wealth from slavery. The vast majority of wealth in this country is inherited. This is not something that people are earning, you know, over the course of their lifetime through hard work. No. So when we're like looking at like, you know, the poverty in our community, that is directly connected to wealth that people are still holding on that they accumulated from slavery. Those people have to be displaced from power. And this is again why I think like, I don't shy away from the word revolution, and it doesn't mean that we're not making reforms. It doesn't mean that we're not identifying, you know, concrete things that have to be done. But when you're talking about revolution, you have to understand that you have to shift an entire paradigm. The people who are in power are white supremacists, point blank, period, or we would not be living in the world that we are living in. This era that we're in right now with Trump, where he's just doing all manner of crazy thing and breaking all kinds of law and being racist, and yet is still able to remain in power, that's because the people who control power want him there. If they were not okay with what he was doing, he would be gone, okay? So there are specific people that we can identify, whether it's locally, whether it's at a state level, whether it's federally, they have to be removed from power, and we have to organize so that we can shift those people out, because something like a court, really, you know, a court system is really arguably a neutral thing. You know what I mean? Like we're going to have, you know, we talk about like, how are we going to resolve conflicts in our communities on the other side? We can create our own court system. The court itself is a neutral thing. What the reason that we keep getting the results that we get is because of who's in control of the courts. You know, the reason that we keep getting the economic results that we get is because who's in control of the economy. So you know, long term and ultimately, like we're going to have to keep organizing and protesting and fighting, and all of those things go hand in hand. And I don't think that you can put this thing back in the bottle. Like I just, you know, I personally have been involved in this now since it was really the Trayvon Martin case that propelled me into it. And I've seen an evolution even since then. And I just think that we are past a point now where people are not going to settle for a conviction in one case. We're past that now, because people have, like, the whole mask has been ripped off of the whole system. And I don't think there's a way to put the cat back in the bag now. Like, I think we've just got to keep going until we actually have justice, like in the textbook definition that you read, Dominique.
I know you have something to say, Don.
I just want to add, though, that that we have to be prepared for things to get worse before they get better. We have to be prepared because we are in a moment that I believe very sincerely is historic. And with the level of movement and the level of organization and the intentional collective consciousness towards making better systems, right? I think we're in a powerful place. But what we also need to know is that these systems are not just here because no one's challenged them. They've been challenged. These systems are strong, and the powers that uphold these systems are strong. And the closer we get to dismantling them, the harder they are going to come after those of us who are trying to create something new. So we have to understand, number one, that this thing is going to get worse before it gets better. But number two is that it will get better. If we fight this fight, there is no place. Listen, we don't have anything to lose at this point fighting against this system. They can't kill us any deader. They can't disenfranchise us any more than they're already doing. They can't. Like, we have to realize that we have nothing left to hold on to. Revolution is born not from a hopeless people, but from a people who believe that there is something better. We are in a moment where a lot of folks believe that there is something better. We will get there, but it's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. And that's the thing that I think we all need to understand. It's very easy to be a keyboard revolutionary. It's not so easy to pay the price, put some skin in the game. We need everybody to understand that you not only have to put your skin in the game, but you also have to do the work. You can't dismantle systems you don't understand. You can't dismantle systems you don't know. If you can't articulate systemic racism and what it means, I want you to stop saying it until you can articulate what it means. If you don't understand what it means to defund the police and you don't have an alternative, I want you to stop saying it until you learn what it means to defund the police. We have got to be willing. We have got to be more than rhetoric. And that means you got to do the work. Like these panels and this stuff, this is the sexy part. This is cute, but this is like 0.1% of what we do all day, right? This is the nice part. We get to dress up and look pretty, but this is not where the work really happens. This is important. Protests are important because visuals and images are important. They are always important in creating narratives. Creating narratives are important. All of that is very, very important, but none of it matters if we aren't doing the work and we aren't willing as a people to do the work. You cannot dismantle systems you don't understand. We have got to know who our enemy is so that we can destroy it. That's it.
Yeah, I would just like to let everybody know, and it has been pushed. There was a Law-Related Education Act that was created in 1978 and dismantled in 1983. And this is actually to bring in information on Supreme Court justices, legal information, what judges are supposed to do, how do you interact with the police officers, how do you respond to certain situations, allowing people to walk, adolescents to walk in an educated fashion. That is now a lot of educators don't even know about it. And it's a problem because the funding has been decreased for it. And it's just like, why are you fighting so hard to keep this information out of people's, head? In my role, in my lane, I'm going to push education, as much education on individuals as I can, because I carry a story that if I would have known then what I know now, I would have been okay. And I didn't. And so I'm going to give it to everybody else so it's not them. And I just want every Black person in every single community that we carry to stop holding on to a title that society gave you. So, and I say that to say, I don't hold on to a title that society gave me because society tells me that I'm a convicted dangerous felon that convicted aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. You will never catch me acting like that. You will never see me a day. I don't care if society told you you're a doctor and no one can ever touch you and you got a couple mil in the bank account. If you are a Black person, you are fighting the same fight that we are all fighting. So please don't ever sit on any status that society has given you. It's not that important. Keep leaning on your Black people, like we've been saying all session. Once again, I just want to thank everybody that joined the panel today. I really enjoyed this. A lot of information was gained and a lot of people speaking on it as well. Like she said, this is a sexy part of what we do. Just make sure you get involved in your community. Make sure you learn more, read more, stay abreast of what's going on with Breonna Taylor. Don't just tweet a hashtag. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Dominique.
Definitely, thank you. Have a nice evening, everyone.
You as
Good night,
well.
everybody.